Hello and welcome to this Hump Day episode of Kennedy Saves the World. I'm joined by Vince August. Maybe you've seen him on Gutfeld. Maybe he was your municipal judge in the aughts in New Jersey when you had run afoul of the law. And now he's an actor and a comic. And in addition to Gutfeld, you're on a lot of other showgrams. And I'm happy that you made time to be here in this podcast studio.
Oh, I am so grateful that you have me here.
Yes.
You kidding me? This is fun.
So we were talking a little bit off air about the OJ verdict, because when we heard about Princess Catherine's cancer diagnosis, it was one of those shocking moments.
Where were you?
Yeah, and you knew exactly where you were, like when the space shuttle exploded, or when Princess Diana died, or the OJ verdict. So where were you during the OJ verdict?
The best place I could be, law school.
Wow.
Yeah.
So were you following it as a law student during the whole trial?
Well, everybody was following it because it was pop culture. But
Mhm.
yeah, as a law student, I was following it. And because of the fact I was a law student, I saw it in a different way.
Yes.
And that's why the verdict didn't surprise me at all. In fact, everyone was getting mad at me because I'm like, they're not getting him on this. I'm like,
Yes.
he's in a walk.
And they're like, no, they have to because he's guilty. And that's how justice works. And you're like, no, they're doing it wrong.
Right.
When did you realize that the case was unraveling with OJ?
The gloves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's when everybody knew. When it was put the gloves on and it was just like, no,
Yeah.
It's like, what are you doing?
And he's got the little latex glove underneath. So it's all friction. It's like,
They could have sanded his hands and fingers down and that glove wouldn't have fit.
Yeah.
He was just never going to put it on the right way.
Mhm.
And what do? Force him? So it was one of those things where it was just like,
I might have done that. Might have got a little Vaseline and lubed up his
tie
hand.
him down, force that glove on his hand.
Just right in there.
Yeah. So that's when everybody knew. And it was
Yeah.
one of those things that I think it was a weird polarizing moment.
Mhm.
Because I was like, I don't understand why people are taking sides on this, because it's like, are you on the side of if you don't prove the case? Yeah, you walk. Or was it one of those first racial moments where it was somehow black versus white? And to me, it was never black versus white. It was, this is how you don't try a case.
Yes.
And I was the lawyer hat.
But they also, they did a lot of things wrong. I mean, Judge
Yes.
Ito did a lot of stuff wrong. I think this will be endlessly fascinating. But also, if you watch O.J. Simpson Made in America, did you see that like 8-part docuseries on ESPN? It was fascinating and really well done. And the person who directed that, Ezra Edelman, he was actually a researcher in 1998 on the Olympics when I worked with him in Nagano.
Wow.
And so it was him and 3 other researchers, and they were all so incredibly smart. And their job was to fly all over the world and interview every single Olympic athlete in every sport. And they were just the most fascinating researchers. And so, and I had been following his career, and I saw it, and I was like, he did such a great job of breaking down what the problems were in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And, you know, and this was after Rodney King. It's kind of easy to get those timelines sort of off or confused, and they didn't do a good job of taking into consideration how the racial imbalance had affected people in the city.
But to me, again, I always take it from the lawyer perspective of when you rush a case as a prosecutor,
Mhm.
this is what happens. And you're seeing it play out right now in Georgia. You're seeing it play out maybe in a lot of these Trump cases where they want him so bad that they make sure that they get an indictment, which anybody can get an indictment.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the easiest thing to do. But are you ready to try your case? And as a lawyer, you have to know when you're ready to try your case. And if you have a weak case, that's when you sit down and start negotiating and you start
Yes.
plea bargaining. And that was one of those cases where they just wanted him so bad.
Yes, and they knew he was guilty. Everyone knew he was guilty.
And that's
and
why
again, if you watch that docuseries, everyone around was like, "Yeah, he's guilty." He even said he was guilty. Like,
Yeah.
he told me he was guilty, and it's like, Jesus.
Yeah. And whenever someone comes to me with a law, because I still practice law, and someone says to me, what do you think the outcome of this case is? I'm like, I don't make predictions. And when they're like, well, don't you have a feeling? I'm like, look, OJ,
Mhm.
that's all you need to know about if you think you can win a case and it's lock solid and everyone saw what happened. No, there's no such thing, especially with a jury.
Mhm.
With a judge, a bench trial, yeah, you kind of get a feel for it because the law is the law and the judges pretty much know how to do it.
Yes.
But with a jury, you have no idea.
Are you a trial lawyer?
Yeah,
Wow, is that fun?
it is.
So
Yeah.
did you really have to stop being a judge because of your comedy career?
Yeah, so what had happened was I was nominated originally, I was approached by the mayor and council, and they said, when they brought me in, I thought they wanted to make me either prosecutor or public defender,
Oh,
and I was thinking public defender because they knew I had a criminal defense practice,
yes.
and then they said, "We wanna make you judge," and I was like, "Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea," and they were like, What are you talking about? We wanna make you judge." I'm like, "Yeah," and I was literally going to the city. I had a set of Gotham that night,
Mhm,
and I had at the time, we used to carry around, DVDs of our sets in case
mhm.
we had to give them to a booker, and I took one out. I'm like, "You should really watch this," and he goes, "Is this the comedy thing?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Yeah, we know about it. We're fine." I'm like, "No, you should really watch this." And they're like, "Well, we're gonna vote for you anyway." And it was at the time 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats, 5-0 vote. They put me in,
Wow.
and I completely disclosed everything to the administrative office of the courts. And they were like, "All right, you can't do these 3 things." And I'm like, "All right, well, I really don't do that stuff where I go on and commentate about a case."
Oh, okay.
And I use separate names, so it was never an issue. And then I was
Is
fine.
it true that you were on stage as Shirley Temple?
I was on the TV show What Would You Do?
Mhm,
And that's the thing that got them more mad than the stand up
mhm.
because they had never seen the stand up, but they saw me play these nefarious characters on What Would You Do? And that was the thing that made them say, "You're going to be recognizable."
Were they worried that if a defendant was found guilty in your courtroom, that they could call for a mistrial because you were prejudiced because of
Yes.
a character that you had played?
That's exactly what it was.
Wow.
Yeah. And I got it. I understood it to a certain degree. But then there's well, you understand it's just a role.
Mhm,
And they're like, "Yeah, but we think the public is too stupid and they don't understand it." And there's also this really kind of, white tower kind of feel that judges have
mhm.
that, they're above society, separated from society. So, we're not like everyone else. And I'm like, that is probably the worst perspective to have as a judge because mine was the complete opposite. Mine is I am everybody else, which is why I'm going to look at this case like everybody else
Mhm.
and treat it as a human being, not as someone who's elevated above society, looking down on it and then kind of, making these decisions.
Yeah, we do the same thing with cops to some degree, politicians, which I don't know
I
why
don't know.
anymore,
The celebrity.
doctors,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and we think that they are imbued with special powers.
And the judges in New Jersey, for the most part, have that ego hubris type of feel. So I think that was another thing that they didn't like about my argument against this, which is, look, I'm probably in front of more people than any of you
Yeah.
because I'm always in front of a comedy club crowd. I have more interaction with the public than any of you. I think I'm actually better to serve the bench than most of you are because you're isolated from society.
Yes.
And I'm around
I
society on
think
a constant
I mean
basis.
that's my biggest issue with professors. And it's like they are entrusted with teaching people over for critical a period of development that makes you who you are. And
Yeah.
there's so much responsibility that they have, and they do think that they're better than everybody else and smarter than everybody else, and somehow intelligence makes you better naturally, which it doesn't. But also they're in a bubble. Like they don't interact, they're not challenged by people outside of their sphere.
But you're seeing that in Hollywood too now.
Yes.
If you look at the writing in Hollywood and what scripts are being written and based on, because it's so much superhero stuff, because it's not real life stuff anymore, now it becomes let's start mixing in a lot of this ideology, a lot of this stuff that we're learning in schools, as opposed to human interaction,
Hmm.
because they are isolated from society.
Yes.
And even the Oscars now, when you look at the distance between actors in Hollywood and the public, it's almost as if, well, we don't care what you like. We're just going to create our art. And if you want to watch it, great. If not, we don't care either
Hmm.
because it's paid for by advertising and, product marketing and product placement. And it's like, okay, well, eventually you're going to lose your audience. And when you lose your audience, you're going to lose that money too. So don't you want to have a relationship with your audience?
No, they don't, because
Right.
they're more invested in impressing people like Judd Apatow and these
Yeah.
really politically powerful people. They're political people. They have their very warped, myopic, ultra leftist progressive views, but they're powerful in Hollywood, and that they're the ones who have the most influence and oftentimes hold the purse strings. And I've talked to actors, I've talked to directors, and people who they stay quiet about their political beliefs, even if they're libertarian, because
Because
they
right,
know
right.
if they honestly engage about what they believe in, they will be blacklisted.
Don't go anywhere. More Kennedy Saves the World right after this.
Well, because now even with that, you have to agree on everything on
Yes.
your side. Like you can't uncheck one box.
No.
And that's the really weird thing about it. That's the Orwellian part of this
Yes.
that's like really disturbing. It's like, well, hold on a second. I can't disagree with anything
Yeah.
that we believe in. Really? Not even like the cop thing, not even like the gun thing to a certain extent.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're all in or you're out. So it's, well, I know I'm not all in. I guess I should kind of keep my mouth shut about a couple things.
Hmm.
You know what? Better keep my mouth shut about everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's a shame because then people go unchallenged. And then, we get into the cycle where really bad scripts are pushed to the fore and they make bad movies that no one wants to see because they don't see themselves in the movies anymore because they're being preached to.
But it's also that if I say that this doesn't fit the story, again, it's like unchecking one of those boxes.
Yes.
And it's, you know what? Fine, I'll do the script the way it is. Whereas actors used to look at scripts and be like, no, I don't like this.
Hmm.
And, that's when you look at, to me, what is right now one of the two best comedies is um, Curb Your Enthusiasm, where it's, we're going to improvise this stuff.
Yes.
Come on set, have the freedom to be you, and look at what you get. When you look at South Park, which is, to me, I think the most important comedy maybe of this generation.
So as a parent, like that saved my children. It really did because both my kids have gone through public school in LA and New York, and there's a lot of dogma and there's a lot of groupthink.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is in most public schools across the country, not just in big cities. And when they started watching South Park, they realized that there was joy in humor, and humor comes from making fun of the stuff that you're not supposed to make fun of.
Right.
And when they realized that, for them, it was very freeing. And, I think there are a lot of parents who are terrified of their kids laughing and thinking for themselves.
Without guardrails.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is incredibly important.
I say it all the time. Those two guys are probably the two most important people in comedy in the last 30 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember when MTV passed on that when I was there.
Yeah.
It's like, that's really, like, even then I knew, like, that's really dumb.
Yeah.
Like, we should be doing this. And Comedy Central's like, we'll do it. We're great with this.
Yeah. And MTV at the time had Beavis and Butthead,
Yeah.
which wasn't too far removed from that.
No.
So yeah, it's one of those decisions.
And Mike Judge is also a genius. Like, if you look at what he's done, Silicon Valley, Idiocracy, Office Space, King of the Hill, there's so many things where you start to see a narrative and, the way he points out the absurdity.
See, now all of those shows got made. You couldn't even pitch them today.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way. That's really, I didn't even think about that. Like, they always say, like, Blazing Saddles you could never make today, even though it's farce. Like, it's showing you how absurd racism is, but you still wouldn't be able to make it. But I never thought that about Idiocracy. But that is so true.
Can't even pitch it. Yeah.
Damn, Vince. So what is your project that you're most either invested in or excited about right now?
I've been working on something actually for years that I wanted to get done. And it's funny because everyone wanted to originally put me in a Judge Judy position.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
We have a guy who's turnkey, put him on a bench, and he could do it a little bit different than Judy because he's going to bring humor.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, her producer and director hand-delivered me to CBS and said, we're going to shoot the pilot right in her studio. And she said, over my dead body.
Really?
And, yeah.
Why? Just didn't like the competition?
She never got on the phone with me to answer that question. And we both went to the same law school. So I tried to call her one alumni to another, and that never happened. And honestly,
Doesn't she have enough money? I mean, she's made like probably close to $1 billion in syndication.
But it's not about money at that point. It's about control.
That's so, I know, but even like one of the most important things that I've learned, and I've learned this watching people do it the right way and the wrong way. You need to mentor people. You need to encourage people to essentially replace you and make the world a better place when you're not there anymore.
That's Jon Stewart. That's not Judy.
That's a damn shame.
Yeah. And what she did at the time was she said, fine, you want another judge show? I'm going to produce it and make it. And from what I understand, Les Moonves said, well, it's on your dime. And she said, okay. And that's when we got Hot Bench. So I was kind of bumped for her version of it, which was whatever. It didn't break my heart because I felt that that would only capture one aspect of me.
Yeah.
What I would love to do is kind of a hybrid of a judge show and a talk show and turn it into what would be like a law class lecture room.
See, I think people would be really interested in that. I think people are really interested in knowing how the law works. And, you know, there are so many intuitive things that you really feel like if you were just given a few tools, you could figure things out pretty quickly in terms of the law. And if you actually did that with people and gave them a little bit of respect, like, hey, maybe you didn't go to law school, but you're smart enough to, you know, here's these three things. Here are three elements that maybe you haven't come across before. I'm going to give these to you. Let's figure this out. That would be amazing.
Yeah. And I like the idea of having two people take opposing points of an argument, like a moot court or a mock trial, and then removing them from set. And then me doing what I do, what I'm used to doing with an audience is go into the audience, poll the audience, and turn them into a jury. And get some questions from them. Let me field the questions, let them make a decision. And then ultimately I would rule as judge, whether I take their opinion or not, and give my reasoning for it. And then bring everyone in and say, here's the final ruling.
Who would be your Doug Llewellyn? I think that's the most important question.
You know, it's, to me, it's the idea of bringing people from both sides in and being able to have an open, it doesn't have to be I tell people all the time, I hate the word debate because I don't think everything needs to be a debate. I think it needs to be a discussion. And even when I argue a case in front of a judge, you're not necessarily debating the other side. What you're doing is you're proposing your side and you're showing why you're right in terms of your side, which doesn't have to be attacked. Like I never attack a lawyer when I'm arguing a case. And you see that in politics now where it's, you know what, I don't know if I'm going to win this argument, so I'm going to attack the person's character. That never happens in a courtroom. And I think if you can bring that element to television and show people, look, this is how things really happen in courtrooms. And we don't attack each other because it's not personal.
What if you did that with political issues, though?
You can.
Yeah. I mean, but I think that would be really interesting if you force people to come from a place of curiosity. As opposed to conflict, because conflict is lazy. Conflict is easy. And it has become so inflated. It is our fallback mechanism for everything. And it's like, you know, you just, like you said, if you don't check one of my boxes, you're dead to me. Like you're the devil. You're literally Hitler. And it's like, we have to be able to have disagreements and we have to be able to have conversations. And you should be able to go, oh, I don't agree with you, but I totally understand why you feel the way you do. And maybe that's because like I was a Republican growing up and both my parents were Democrats.
Look, I argued a case on Wednesday.
I think I'm adopted.
It was a family law case. And the first thing you do, and the first thing a good judge does is say, okay, what if we agreed on? So when you start at that place,
that's nice.
Judge, here are the issues that we've resolved. A, B, and C. Okay. So then we have how many issues left? We have 3 issues left. We're halfway home. When you start at that place, and you could do that with every political argument, you could do it with anything in the zeitgeist.
I wish they would do that. I mean, I wish they would do that with immigration. I wish someone was an adult and say, okay, what do we agree on? And I know there are these study groups in Congress with Republicans and Democrats, but they're still doing it wrong.
They are.
And they still, like, when it comes down to a contentious vote, it all goes party line.
Well, and the other thing is, too, is everything has to be in the bill. And I've always said, no, it doesn't. You know
I hate those bills.
Right. Which is why I love line item vetoes.
Yes.
Because you know what? If we agree on 3 things and we're off on the other 3, it doesn't have to be, we'll take the 3 things we agree on and now we're going to make concessions on those. Well, why? We've said we agree on that. Yeah, but that's the only way we're going to get the other 3 done. No. The 3 we agree on, they're going into the bill. They're getting passed right now. Now let's sit down and again, let's be adults about these other 3 issues and break them down.
Why does immigration rely on funding for Ukraine? Those are 2 completely separate things.
Right.
And you can have very different feelings about them.
And we see it with the gun thing and the abortion thing the most, whereas the Republicans lose every time on the abortion issue because they don't know how to make compromise within their own party. And you see with the gun thing with the left, where they don't know how to make compromise within their own party because it has to be an all or nothing.
Yes.
And it's like, those two issues are never going to be all or
But that
nothing.
is the enemy of rationality. I mean,
Yes.
and that's what drives me crazy. And it doesn't mean you have to be a moderate.
No.
It really doesn't. But you're absolutely right about that. Vince, we must part. Please come back. And I want to hear more about your court show, because I think it could be absolutely incredible.
Yeah, anytime.
It's now 14 minutes to Wapner. 14 minutes to Vince. It's 14 minutes. All right. Thank you, my friend. Good luck with everything. I'll see you on Gutfeld.
Yeah.
Woo! All right. This has been Kennedy Saves the World. I'm Kennedy.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app. Oh, go ahead and leave me a review while you're there. I'd love to hear what you have to say. You've been listening to Kennedy Saves the World on the Fox News Podcast Network.